Starting lineup: Mordekaiser, Zoe, Diana, Ashe, Echo, up against Set, Amumu, Ari, Jinx, Lulu. Rating of the picks for a lower ranked game: Mordekaiser as a top 9, Zoe in the jungle 4. Diana as a mid, we're going to bump Diana up from a 2 to a 3 for a mid. So that's a 3 as a mid for the lower ranked for Diana. Ashe as a shooter 6. Echo in support 5. Set as a top 9. Amumu in the jungle 9. Ari as a mid 7. Lulu in support. We're going to bump Lulu up for the lower ranked from a 6 to a 7. So that's a 7 for Lulu in support. Here featured in this game, brought to you by me, one of the worst champions in the entire game, and especially for the casuals. Currently coming in at a 3 out of 10 in shooter slot for the quick play, swift play, casuals, and at a 4 out of 10 for the lower ranked. As a shooter, Jinx, almost impossible to play. Even her name means misery and failure. Be fun to see if we can tame the beast, and as long as we do not get the desired win-loss, we may as well keep looking around. It's not like these hyper-high mastery players are really bringing anything to the table anyway, with their 50 and 60 mastery really doing nothing spectacular, to say the least. Furthermore, there may be a little bit of reverse psychology opportunity here, because who knows, maybe I can get all of you to up your game by deliberately going the wrong way. If I'm able to draw any kind of baseline conclusion, this person identifies by looking at their profile as a woman. This person identifies as a woman. This person identifies as a woman. This person identifies as a woman. And this person identifies as a woman. We have really fallen upon a very new age and very new times. The idea that I, back in the day as a child, would run into large groups of girls by picking up video games? It seems like a good number of human beings are being thoroughly reprogrammed for whatever reason. Very difficult for an old geezer like me to find his way in that kind of world. Not sure if that's a bad thing. We're gonna have this Set player here who wanted to enter this game so as to try out the new skin for Set and has never played Set before. So just go ahead, just turn this ranked game into some kind of fashion experiment. Because what the heck, it's bottom of the barrel anyway. We're gonna have this Heartache Amumu player, which, when you see him play, you can thoroughly understand why he would have a heartache. It's uplifting to see that so many around me have some newfound stability when it comes to League, now that I've moved on to a cliché, rather than playing something like Zed. However, I'm not going to lie, for now, way too boring without all the haters. But maybe we can find some new excitement. There's certainly a lot of volatile stuff going on in the shooter position anyway. Moving on. First play, and we're gonna get a little bit of exploration action from this Lulu player. I'm going to try to jump in, but the damage has already been done. And much like the French language, to everything there is an exception. And once every blue moon, this kind of clown stuff will actually work. However, you could say that about just about anything. And so we're gonna get the worst possible reaction to all of this that you can imagine. You couldn't really respond in a more horrible way. This mid player is going to ignore everything, even though the enemy mid is right here. This Amumu player is going to jump directly into the chaos and just get farmed again. Because what else would you do if there's 4 people there? Just jump directly into it. This Amumu player is going to end up building nothing but pure armor, going up against 1. Mordekaiser, 2. Zoe, 3. Diana, and 4. Echo. And your response is to build nothing but pure armor. Truly frightening stuff. How can you breed unaided? A lot of random number generated there in the allotments, but after a while it doesn't quite feel that random anymore. And mids being beyond selfish is a top 3, count on it, you bet, type of stats and cliche. You pretty much see the exact same thing in every single game. For some reason, mid really attracts a type of crowd that just never wants to bother with anything. The mindset is really, you get invaded by 4 people, but how does that have anything to do with me? Just let the shooter and the support clean it up. Because it's 4 people, so it's their job. And you always love to reward clown show stuff like this, like playing Echo in support, playing Zoe in jungle. It's always a good thing when those types of behaviors receive positive reinforcement. You should definitely encourage that type of stuff. With all of this, the blue team is going to end up starting with about 1,000 cash more than the red team, which is immediately going to go into Kraken and so on, giving the Ashe player the illusion that she can indeed go toe-to-toe with Jinx when it comes to raw damage, which is of course complete nonsense. So there as well, a whole bunch of harmful reinforcement. There's also a lot of this Assassin's Creed stuff in this play. The whole taking the long route and going around and through the bushes and you're super sneaky. In practice, what you're going to want to do is stay the closest you possibly can to your own side so you have the shortest possible route back to the defensive structures. That is really what you're looking for here. Not some kind of super smart plan to go around. Because the farther away you get from your fountain and your turrets, the less leverage that you have. You get that shred and late game scaling on Jinx, more hyper carry multipliers, as opposed to that very monotonous utility that nobody really gets Ashe for. Because as I keep saying over and over again, people just simply get Ashe because they like white girls. Too recently, we were literally playing with an individual who had picked up Ashe and called himself I Like Pale Girls. She is up there with the most look-based picks in the game. But of course, you don't know that as Ashe here, and you don't have to know that, because you have an extra 1,000 to buy Kraken with, and so you can hide the fact that you are quite terrible at dealing damage compared to other marksmen because of the fact that you have the 3 early game kills on Team Blue. Jinx, very much a late game champ, can become a monster if the game goes on long enough. That means that a lot of what I'm trying to do early game is mostly surviving. And it's not hard to see how so many times Jinx is the leading cause of team breakups and team meltdowns in the amateurs because of course, again, Nobody knows all this, so they just end up playing next to Jinx and they end up expecting her to be able to keep up with everyone, which is of course statistically impossible in early game, as she can be brought to heal in a split second and she has very few tools without her items. This enemy Zoe player is going to end up making the decision to leave this RE alone, which was a clear mistake on his part, because as we will see later, this RE has almost no positioning skills and almost no tactical ability, and so undoubtedly, the fish would have been much fatter for this jungler player if he had been harassing the mid lane. This Zoe player in many ways going to let this Echo player die, and as a means of projection we will watch her later on getting very tilted at this Echo player, because of course we have to cover up the fact that we're actually scumbags and that we just failed any kind of protective responsibility we had in that moment. You see this Time Winder spell a couple of times from Echo. It's a boomerang disc that deals damage on the way out and back. Reminds me a lot of Sivir's boomerang, which also partially does magic damage. If Echo's boomerang hits the enemy twice, it deals extra damage. As a bonus, you get that slow and sometimes you can set up the kill, which is presumably the very superficial reason to play Echo in support. But that utility largely going to waste in a lot of these plays because this Echo is going to end up tanking his way through. And for me at this point, 3 to 4 minutes in, it is a pretty bleak spectacle, and you can tell by my demeanor, because I just see my entire team getting farmed in the opening, and now the enemy jungler has made the decision to fire on all cylinders at the bottom lane, which is very unusual as well. It really seems at this point in the game to me like I have joined an inherently lost cause. And indeed, over time, you get the impression that it's not just that I'm having trouble finding a good position for myself lane-wise or role-wise, but it is also the fact that the top laners and the mid laners on my team systematically always lose their matchups, which is really something that is very difficult for me to help. If this is inherently happening in the mid lane or the top lane and I am slotted into another lane, then the game is pretty much played. And we've been seeing a lot of that lately. And just a bit of a smooch between this Diana and Ari. And it's almost like a Chanel Preston scene revived. Especially like this when they pull away early. You get a lot of spectacle down low, and we're gonna have Echo using the Aztec statuettes, jumping all over the place. You have that little Pix fairy companion constantly chomping away at the enemy. Lulu has a little companion, and every time she auto-attacks, the companion jumps in as well. And just a lot of the third spell here, but not so much the second. Lulu has the ability to polymorph an enemy, and we're really not seeing enough of that here. You frequently see this when people who don't really have a game-like mindset participate in competitive games like League of Legends. For instance, I said earlier that a Mumu has in no way a fitting set of items. It feels like if you would think about the item usage for 5 seconds, you would arrive at a better conclusion. suggesting really that there is no intellectual game going on in this Amumu player's mind. Similarly, when you look at this Ashe player, although Ashe is not good for the amateurs, Ashe is really being used well here in terms of popping her abilities. This is a gamer-like mindset. He's maximizing his ult uptime, etc. This Lulu player much more in the bracket of a Mumu than in the bracket of this Ashe player. Much to my personal dismay and endangerment. But this is the first time that I've actually seen Lulu contribute significantly, and this third spell of hers with the shield giving help picks really a much more durable solution than you would anticipate, and has the ability to turn the tide when you're getting pushed back. The best part about it is that you can make any kind of advance as an ADC for a while. It's interesting, Wild Growth, Lulu's ultimate transforms an ally into a giant, increasing their health and granting them bonus knock-up and knockback in the area. I have not seen this used a single time in this entire thing. Yes, it is much like the old One Azeroth TV would say, if your abilities are not on cooldown, you're essentially wasting them. I've said repeatedly before that I thought Jinx's abilities were quite useless, and especially in terms of the mines, I really stick by it. These mines should theoretically just be in place and operational as soon as you put them down, but here in this clip you clearly notice that they take like 3 seconds to activate. Ashe is running back and forth all over the mines that I put down, and nothing is happening. These junglers could have really been eating all game long in the mid lane. So much overextending, so much weird stuff going on in the mid lane, and just absolutely not taking any kind of advantage of it. A Mumu, a typical example of a champ that could really gank almost non-stop. When you start playing a Mumu, you really feel like a stalker. It's not for everyone. It's definitely a champ that will get many people depressed and will F with your mind. You're going up against a Diana player, so you have a lot of wiggle room. In general, the blue team composition is quite an atrocity in this game. Especially the synergy between the different champions is about as abysmal as it gets. But as we will see, as long as you just put all of the losers always on the same team, then your team comp can be as bad as you like. It will never matter. With players like this Set and this Amumu and this Ari on my team, you can really do what you like. You will never win a single game, as long as he keeps slotting you with people like that. Time for a little bit of hero ball because I'm totally most definitely not the best player on my team, totally not. And so I'm doing some basic map awareness, gonna come over from the bottom lane up to the mid lane because it's that time. We're gonna have this support Dreaming of Echo at Mastery 50. Clearly mastered Echo to such an extent that he can walk in a straight line without using his spells. End up getting taken down by the second ability, enhanced with the Collector. Going to try to reach for a bit, but the mid did no damage whatsoever to the turret, so I can't really go in. So I'm going to wait until Diana is low enough and use the ultimate. One thing about going collector first as an ADC, you're purely looking at crit scaling for your abilities and your auto attack and pouring everything into that, going for an item as well in the collector that will be cheap to acquire and will be very much ready early game. If, for instance, you would go Ruined King here, or for instance, you would go Kraken here, not nearly as much damage would go over from those items to the ultimate spell or to the stun pistol spell. Meaning that your spells really don't come alive as jinx, as relatively worthless as they are. We've already discussed how Jinx is a bit of a team wrecker because of all the early difficulties and how she's very late to come online in the early game, and how casuals do not understand that in the slightest and therefore expect completely unreasonable things of Jinx. But she's a team wrecker in multiple ways because she also has that ultimate which is basically entirely dedicated to kill stealing all across the map. And it must be admitted from a mechanical as well from a visual as well from a feel-good standpoint, one thing I will give Jinx is her kill-stealing ultimate compared to Caitlyn kill-stealing ultimate really just makes Caitlyn's ultimate feel limp and cheap, but absolutely team-wrecking since she's engineered to kill-steal, and that's the entire point of the ultimate. In function very much like Shadow Word Death from a WoW Priest. Absolutely meant for very low health targets. The damage really ramps the lower you get. It's fair to say that it is the most pure execute ability in the game. Yeah, you get the mark of just incompetence from this RE player, the most incompetent all-around player on the map, and just this righteous indignation at a totally inappropriate time where you're autistically chasing this target down while you're surrounded by two enemy champs, completely out of place, and you start hysterically spamming assist as though we were supposed to be there or something, when that was a moment where we couldn't have possibly taken up that responsibility. There was absolutely no reason for us to be around at that point. But what makes it even more ridiculous is that on top of that we were all on the way already, so why are you hysterically crying out for help? It's clear that the cry for help serves more as a blame game than anything else, suggesting that we should have been there, which is ridiculous to say. This RE player will end up going all into Malignance, which is really not suitable at this level of play. You should not be looking to maximize your ultimates as RE as an amateur level player. Her ultimate requires intelligence and skill to use properly. In the hands of an incompetent player, it will more frequently than anything else lead you into death because of the chase down speed. You will start making dumb chase down decisions and get yourself killed that way. I'm very happy to have been a part of League of Legends in the community, and the things that it's taught me about humans I will never forget for as long as I'm physically able to remember. That in now all of this, over time we have not met a single mid yet who put a single coin or a single piece of gold toward defensive items, is just a verdict for all of humanity. The fact that it doesn't even occur to any of you to ever extend your own life. It poetically speaks to human nature. The congregation in the mid, and just this Diana player so freely, nobody putting a body on her, nobody tracking their matchup or following them around in any way. like they have nothing to do with it. I end up just taking the extra cash from damaging the turret because I know that I cannot get away anyway, and I know that if I attack Diana, I will end up getting shot by the turret. We're going to end up having this Ashe take on the Drake because of course your jungler is emotional meltdown Zoe, and yet another ugly face of the high level mastery. At that, by the way, this Amumu, also an ugly face of the high level mastery. At that, by the way, this Echo player, also an ugly face of the high level mastery. And I notice that the moment that it doesn't involve me anymore, suddenly breaking conventional slot rules seems to be okay. Just as long as others do it. The two main mistakes that we've been able to see on so many similar teams, and why primarily this red team top and this red team mid is utterly helpless. All you ever did as a set, all you ever did as RE was just go out and take a million hits, but you do not have any way to mitigate the damage whatsoever, so you're taking it directly to the face. And then as we see from the set player diving in, seemingly played by a young woman calling herself crazy, just absolutely no ability to sense danger or to sense when to go in and when not to go in. You end up running directly into 4 enemies. There's something like a dead zone, there's something like a safe zone, and there is a trajectory that will allow you in many situations to get back to safety. And you just have no comprehension of when to risk it and when not to. The entire red side was in shambles during this segment and this part of the game. And it was plain for anybody with any kind of map insight, map awareness, to see that there was no point anymore beyond just simply slowly defending the base. There were so many pointless deaths of this red top, jungle, and mid that this enemy team became many times stronger than we did in terms of levels and items. Player psychology, it's kind of interesting how there's such atrocious playmaking behavior going on the red team, and yet there's no calling out whatsoever of anything. Nobody's being addressed because of their mistakes. We've seen games on the channel earlier this week where I had one death and people were harassing me and trying to bully me over it for the rest of the game. In this instance, we have just people chain dying and nobody saying a damn thing. Let's have a look at these individuals. Let's consider how they interacted with each other. We have the set player, a young girl playing set because of the Radiant Serpent skin. I really don't quite know how to go from that point on out. I think I've been crazy constructive about this team member, considering the fact that she picked this champion because of an event and wanted to check out what the skin looked like. This is an example of a person who probably doesn't even know that tutorial mode exists, and that you can simply look at your character skins in a private game. You don't have to enter a ranked game for that. Set ended up overall being a suspiciously good and overpowered champion who's still able to perform even at higher levels of play. It turns out that this individual knew nothing about how to use Set's ult, knew nothing about how to use Set's comeback mechanic, and built Set with inefficient offensive items. So yeah, if you were to go down to regular quick play and you were to load a game between Grays and Bronze, without any doubt, you would get a performance from the top that was many times this top's performance. And the good news is that we can't really sink any lower than this. This is truly the bottom of the barrel. The bad news is that somehow I'm still taking all the S. Moving on to this Amumu player, I'll dive into your itemization later in this video. It was pathological. It is worth noting that the Samumu player had about 30 times as many games played as me and is a complete maniac of this video game. This is a person who lives in League of Legends. Extreme mastery, extreme experience. You got all the wrong items. You never, throughout all of this game, you've never assessed a tactical situation appropriately. You went in 1 against 4. You went in 1 against 3. I guess the one thing that was good that the Samumu player did was at least you were using your cooldowns. We have this Lockless, it's an interesting name, RE player. This is, for this month, the worst skilled player that we've seen. This person is in the top 10 worst mechanical players that I've ever played with in my life. And for whatever reason, RE seems to always appeal to people who have no idea what they're doing. I don't know why. I don't know why people who seem to play very well always pick Lux, and people who have no idea what they're doing always pick RE. It's led me to this typical pick rating for RE in the starting lineups of giving her a 5 or a 6 because she's always underperforming because of the people who pick her. She's a lot like Garen, up there with the most molested champions. Garen, RE, and Yasuo are probably the 3 most molested champions, who have all 3 of them very high potential, but are just constantly used incorrectly. We have myself, I believe the only person with a positive KDA on Team Red. By far. 3 minutes into this game, I felt a strong desire to please not be in this game anymore. Why am I always getting the 0 out of 10 RE players? Why am I being lined up with young girls who want to play Set because they want to see what the new skin looks like? Why is that on my side? Why do I never get to beat up a person in lower ranked who is doing that? Why are they always putting those people on my side? I can't recall a single time playing against a person who played a character just because they wanted to find out what the skin looked like. I can't recall a single time playing against an RE player who had no ability to use their basic spells and their basic mechanics. I felt cheated. And one thing that has really been iconic and that has been a returning point for the season in Ranked is that, and I've said this on the second video or the third video of the season when the Noxus team was released, and I'll say it again, it feels like when I don't pop off and when I'm not having monster games, when I don't solo save it, we just cannot win a single ranked game. And this is because I am constantly in these situations. When I look at the enemy top was approximately 5 times better than our top. The enemy jungler was significantly better than our jungler. The enemy mid was approximately 5 times better than our mid. It's just like, what, like what is this game? What is this game? There's nothing for me to do here but die. We have Lulu, definitely the second best player on Team Red, behind me. You definitely convinced me that Lulu has some kind of potential. She's actually not that horrible as a support, I've noticed. I don't really understand why you never once use your ultimate. You can see it there, the green ball above the character portrait, constantly, completely full, never on cooldown because never used. Your build could most definitely use some more defensive elements. You have a great personality for support though. I felt like you really liked helping people, which is very rare. It's a very rare personality to have. You should definitely keep playing support. We have this enemy Mordekaiser player who was just given freebie after freebie and didn't even really need to use his cooldowns at any point. You can see his ultimate is up the whole time. I was in this game with this Mordekaiser player, to my knowledge, I've never seen him use his ultimate. We have this Zoe jungling and just such an atrocity to reward this kind of behavior. You seem to be an awful human being when it comes to being abusive to other players, as well as obviously trolling the whole team by playing Zoe in jungler slot. We have this Diana player, freebie machine for this RE, just everybody's dream. And this is really where you can test Diana out because she's a lot like Katarina, right? Just without the potential. But just like Katarina, it only really works with Diana in extreme situations where you become a snowball machine. And this type of enemy is exactly where you want to test that, because you're just not gonna get away with this kind of play higher up. We have this Ashe player, probably all around the best player on Team Blue in my matchup. Two best players in this game were playing shooter in this case. You were very rational about your abilities and your items. You're still focusing slightly too much on attack speed. The way you used some of these ultimate abilities suggests that you have a very good understanding of what you're doing and that you know what matters in the game. Very high map awareness, at some points taking on the burden that really was reserved for this jungler player, who was just too lazy and incompetent to deal with it. Was a very good player, this Ashe player, but you're going to have to learn that Ashe is a boring utility champion, because you're most likely playing her for the looks. We have this Echo Dream person, yeah, the ultimate kind of selfish German. Like I said before, Echo is really the embodiment of today's Germany. You're so selfish that you assume that we typically slot mid and support according to magic damage output and ability power output, so you have the preference to play mid and support. Because you assume that support just means dealing magic damage like in the mid. And so you're just wrecking team by team supposedly as you care about nothing but mastery in this person and trying to prove some deranged point. You just end up playing support for all these ranked teams as Echo. Like imagine me going on Zed and starting to play support. And just nobody says a damn word about any of this, right? Nobody has any criticism for this guy. It's unbelievable. It seems like other people always get away with everything. But yeah, this is definitely not recommendable. Echo is not fit for support. You will end up dragging your ADCs down. It's also funny that you think that it's just okay to eat as much up from your ADC as you possibly can. This Lulu player was a complete living legend in that particular category. This was one of the first support players where I actually saw like real pro behavior. This Na La La 206 individual just literally let me have extra money and extra minions. She allowed me to finish off all the individual minions so that I could build up bank and I could have a bunch of high DPS items as a shooter, which is something that a pro team would do. Which is one of the reasons why you don't want to play Killer Echo in support. because you're just gonna eat up everything that Ash could possibly get, which will have you ending up with a powerless Ash. Overall, get me a better game, man. Get me into some better games that I can do some stuff. I can't do it if half the team is handicapped. Taking a look at the scoreboard here, this is an interesting approach here by itself. This was an extremely experienced player. I don't even know how people are capable of playing this many games. We certainly have a long road ahead of us if we're ever wanting to get into that games played realm. This person has to have easily 30 or more times the amount of games that I have played on his resume. And so you have a mental illness of some kind, naturally, because you have here, if we're going to count, a mage, you have a mage, you have a mage, you have a shooter, and you have a mage. So what you did here was you went anti-attack damage, you went anti-attack damage, and you went partially anti-attack damage. And so just look for help. That's the best thing that I can tell you is look for some help. You're gonna need some help because you're not doing very well. Diana pretty damn weak early on, which is what you can see here. Now in general, from what I've seen, she usually stays weak permanently because she is all around not a good pick. But in this case, you can tell that the complete lack of skill of the RE player allowed her to get systematically more and more kills, and you just end up excelling here. The gap becomes really large. The biggest disparity that we have here is this RE player with 4 wards placed versus this Lulu player with 40 wards placed. And so these things are free. We're not paying anything for this. The only person who was paying was this Echo player. And yet you have very little contributions here, which affects all of our defensive capacity. You seemed at times to really want to help out. If you do, seeing the enemy coming is a huge deal. You should know that for next time. If we know in advance where the enemy is, we will gain massive advantages if you're going to try to climb back into a fight like this. Moving on.